Tonight was something we all need to hear, me absolutely included. So tonight and tomorrow is the 5th of Teves. And as I posted, the 5th of Teves in 1987 was suddenly, after over a year of waiting, when the federal judge gave his verdict in which he completely said that there were all these very, very valuable, expensive, rare, and holy books that were in the library of the Rebbe, in the library of Agudas Chasidei Chabad, like a research library, so to speak, of rare manuscripts, and they noticed they were missing. And someone had been taking them out and selling them because they were very, very rare manuscripts, and they were being sold. And that's actually how it was even found out what was going on, because in Israel, some things were on the market, and somebody saw them and said, wait, that's from Lubavitch Rebbe's library. What's going on? Contacted Lubavitch, turning cameras, and it still was pretty miraculous that they caught and then tried to speak directly to the person in a more discreet way and do anything, go to a Beit Din, refuse. And in the end, with the psak, went to a federal court. And today, on the 5th of Teves, is when the judge said, absolutely everything here belongs to the Chabad library, the Rebbe's library, because in essence, the Rebbe belongs to Chabad. That was sort of the deciding concept. In other words, the debate was, wait, this was the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe's library, and now he's gone, so various family members can inherit, make money off it. And the claim of Chabad was, no, this wasn't a personal library. There was nothing personal in the life of a Rebbe. A Rebbe belongs to his Hasidim. The library belongs to the Hasidim. The Rebbe belongs to the Hasidim. It's all one situation. And this non-Jewish federal judge in the end agreed and wrote a verdict saying as such. So the reason that what I was bringing out to the class was that the Rebbe said when this happened, that this is such an auspicious time. It's like the 19th of Kislev in our generation. It's like there was an entire prosecution on the movement, on Hasidus, on are the wealth springs being spread forth. And everything that played out in the federal court was really playing out in the courts above. And the complete vindication in the courts below really mirrored what was going on above. And the Rebbe says, so all the gates are open. And I remember literally then, the mitzvah of the movement was, get a Jew to ask what he wants. Because whatever you want now will be given. I was in Israel then. I remember they just took us to the kever of somebody holy, somebody great. Just ask whatever you want. Now's the time. And they were like, that time they were going around like all the Jewish neighborhoods and just saying, just give us your notes, give us your requests. That's the issue of the moment, is just turn to God and ask, because the gates are wide open. So that was the idea, and that's very special tonight and tomorrow. That was what was going on. So what we wanted to talk about was something from the Parsha, Parshas Vayigash. Now, of course, in Parshas Vayigash, there's a lot to talk about, and I'm only going to focus on one thing, trying to find something practical and relevant. So this week's Torah portion, Vayigash, culminates Joseph's journey, a full circle. Now, what started this whole journey? The talk that Yosef was saying to his fathers about his brothers, and even more, the talk among the brothers themselves, which took this flicker and made it bigger and bigger and a bigger flame until literally they were convinced that according to Jewish law, they are supposed to kill Yosef. They literally paskined. They literally held a court among themselves and said, yes, Yosef deserves the death penalty. Why? What was their rationale? Because they looked at what he was doing and they said, he is clearly trying to cut us off. And this follows the pattern. Avraham had a Yitzchak and a Yishmael and about 6 other children, but there was only one son that inherited him, only Yitzchak. And Yitzchak had a Yaakov and had an Esav, but there was only one son that got him, only Yaakov. Esav didn't inherit the spiritual riches of Yitzchak, which is the Jewish people in the land of Israel. And now Yosef wants to follow the same pattern. Our father has 12 sons, and he wants the same thing. Abraham, all of his spiritual wealth went to Yitzchak. Yitzchak, all of his spiritual wealth went to Yaakov. And now Yosef wants the same thing. He's, buddy there with our father, bad-mouthing us, having this special relationship, and he's trying to either have our father curse us, have our father cut us off, have our father do something that we're not going to inherit being part of the Jewish people and getting Israel. It's going to be just him, a solo deal. We see by what he's doing. This is what he wants. In other words, once something happens and now this sounds ridiculous to us. I mean, come on, they really thought this? But they actually really did. They really thought this. They really thought there is a law. If someone is trying to kill you, you have an obligation to kill him first. And they said, that's it. Yosef is either going to get us physically or spiritually killed. And we see it because once something happened, and then you start talking, 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 and you build, and you build, and you build, and it becomes so concrete. All of your words have created this whole new reality that's completely real to you. And that is exactly what happened. Now, again, they were righteous people. They weren't, children in the playground mad at each other. It wasn't, when your kids fight, sibling rivalry. Some people say, oh, we can't relate to it. It's sibling rivalry. It was not sibling rivalry. These were really great people. And they sincerely thought that Yosef wanted to cut them off from the line. And therefore, they said, we have to stop him. He's trying to kill us. We have to stop him first. And this just shows us the damaging impact of speech. I mean, literally, for 22 years, Yosef was separated from his whole family. Yaakov, his father, actively mourned his son for 22 years. For 22 years, God wasn't talking to him because he was in a state of mourning, because he literally thought Yosef was gone. And since Yosef didn't pass away, that intense grief stayed for 22 years, meaning God gives us a blessing. When someone passes away, after a while, our grief heals. We say time heals is really very true. God literally blesses us that our grief heals. But here, there wasn't that blessing because Yosef wasn't dead. So Yaakov was in an active mourning for his beloved son for 22 years. Those words had a lot to do with it. I want to share a modern day, not exactly version of this story, a different twist, but I thought it was very, very, very impactful. Now, this story is with a Chabad representative, a shliach. This was probably in like the 60s or maybe the early 70s in LA. The shliach actually has passed away since. He got sick and he passed away, but I think it's a very powerful story. The shliach was referred to by his last name, which was Schwartz, and somehow everyone called him Schwartzy. So I'll call him Schwartzy. So this was Hanukkah. This is a Hanukkah story. A little bit late, but that's okay. This was Hanukkah. And Hanukkah for a Chabad shliach means you run around all day long, all night long. This was, of course, like in the early years. It was probably in the early 70s, but still you ran around to give out menorahs from house to house to house to house to light with people, to light with people, to light with people for hours, every single day. So it was one of the nights of Hanukkah, and it was late at night, and Schwartz was in his office, exhausted, beyond, completely drained. Needless to say, he had not gone home. He had not yet lit his own menorah, and he was completely done. And he knew he had to get home. He couldn't fall asleep. He had to go home. He had to light a menorah, his own. So he goes. He had some man, maybe someone from the college, that was helping him, and the two of them get in his car. And normally in LA, there was a lot of really dangerous neighborhoods. And so Schwartzy took the shortcut, which is a long cut normally, and would skirt around these neighborhoods to drive home. From his office to his house, he would circumvent all these places that the police don't really like to go into either. But this night, he was so exhausted. He said, I'm just going straight. Every good thing he did that day would protect him. He just had to get home. So he's driving straight through this pitch black neighborhood. Dark, no lights on, very scary. No cops go there, for sure not at night. And suddenly his car stops. He had run out of gas. Now he had been running and running and running all day and all night, and he didn't even notice. And he's in this very dangerous neighborhood, and he doesn't have any gas in his car. And he's like, what do I do? He said to the boy, I guess we got to start walking. And this is the middle of the night. We got to look for a light. It's very late at night. We got to look for a light and hope that the people are friendly. And they're looking and they don't see any light. Nobody in that neighborhood wanted anyone to notice them at night. So it was completely dark. And they're looking and they're looking. And they see distance from them a light. And they're like, okay, that's the light. We're going to go for it. And they walk about 2 blocks in this very scary neighborhood. And they see, yeah, there's a light on. Someone has a light on. They go up to this house and knock on the door, and nobody answers. It's late at night. You don't answer doors in that neighborhood, especially not late at night. But they were really desperate, so they started knocking louder and longer, and they heard someone coming to the door, and someone opened the door. And the person did not look very friendly. He was very big, a lot of tattoos, a different color than we are, a lot of jewelry, and he did not look very friendly. And they're sort of standing there, these 2 wimpy looking rabbis clutching their menorahs. He had taken the menorah out of the car with him. You never know where you're going to find a Jew. And he looks at them and he calls to someone and he says, someone came for you. You have visitors. And he said, what are you doing here? And they said, well, our car ran out of gas. He gives them a look like, are you crazy? And he said, I'll take care of it. Where's your car? Here, go into my wife. They tell them where the car is. Don't know what's going on. They go in and they see in the house a woman who was a Jewish woman. she sees them. She sees the rabbis. She sees the menorahs, and she starts crying. And she's like, I can't believe you came for me. I can't believe you came for me. They're like, we didn't know we came for you. Yeah, whatever. They didn't say that. What's going on? She said her story, that she was a Jewish girl, but a regular Jewish family, and things happened in her life. She made a bunch of bad choices, and she had with her family, with her parents, with her mother. They sort of mutually cut off ties for a long time. And she had nothing to do with her parents. She had nothing to do with her family. She's living with this person in a very, very foreign neighborhood, nothing like her world at all, but this is what her world had become, but knowing it's not really her world. And she said recently she started feeling really bad. She really wanted to reconnect to her parents. So she reached out to her mother. So you'd think the story is, and her mother was so happy that finally her daughter, came back from the dead. But the mother, Jay, wasn't like that. And the mother was very harsh with her and said a lot of harsh words. Again, words, you got to be so careful with your words. And the mother basically said, like, what are you calling me for? Well, I'm your daughter. We want a relationship. I have no relationship with you. You're not like my daughter anymore. You live a different world. You live a different life. Hanukkah's coming. You probably don't even know. You probably don't even have them. And you're not my daughter anymore. You've got nothing to do with it. A lot of very harsh, very hurtful words. And that door was slammed shut. And she really felt bad. And she really wanted some way to reconnect. And she said, and then God sent me a menorah. God sent me you. God sent me a menorah. And they lit the menorah with her. And they spoke to her. And Schwartzy had a very special way of talking to people. People were very far, very alienated. He spoke to her for a long time. Till the guy came back and said there was gas in the car, and he got her contact information. Those days it wasn't a cell phone or email. He got her contact information, and he kept speaking to her, and gradually he got her to come to his house, and she started learning with his wife, and eventually she left that man and that world and that life, and she actually came back to Judaism and is living a religious life today. I thought it was an incredible thing that happened, the incredible hand of God every step of the way, including times when it seems like, what is going on? Or we messed up, or we did wrong. And there's a God leading every step. But I also thought it was very strong to me, this impact of like those harsh words, the words between her and her family that alienated her in the first place. And then when she wanted to come back, again, the words that shut that door. And I really feel that one of the many messages we can take from this week's Torah portion is to really, really be careful with our words, to really, really, really take things to heart. Yes, here there was a happy ending with a lot of God's intervention, but on our end, we need to be so, so careful with our words. And specifically, of course, very often we think of our words, we think of the negative words we say to other people, the harsh words, the malicious words, the gossip. In the Talmud, it speaks about gossip killing 3. And the Baal Shem Tov explains that the 3 people killed by gossip are the one who thought up the idea in the first place, the one who tells it, and the one who listens to it. Even listening to it, as we will discuss, is incredibly harmful, damaging, and wrong. And of course, nobody here is getting killed physically, but the spiritual killing is actually even worse. And actually, it's very interesting because gossip and all the branches of gossip are also forbidden for a Noahide, not only for a Jew. So you could say, well, Noahides have 7 laws. Which of the 7 laws is thou shalt not gossip? And it's under the prohibition of murder. Under the Noahide's prohibition of murder is you cannot embarrass, you cannot gossip, you cannot be tale-bearing. So it is literally considered on some level a form of murder. Now, on Yom Kippur, we keep saying 10 times, 44 confessions. 10 of the 44 have to do with speech. I always relate to all of them. 10 out of the 44, one's on gossip, one's on Lashon Hara, there are others, but 10 of the 44, that's almost 25% of our confessions on Yom Kippur have to do with how we use our speech. There's a reason for that. There's a reason our sages are giving us 10 things to think about. Again, almost 25%. Oh, watch your words. Now, in terms of gossip itself, there's 3 broad categories. I'm not going to go into a lot of the laws tonight. Some of you know the laws far better than me. Some maybe not as well, but I'll just go through the basic ideas, and then I wanted to give a deeper perspective on it. The first category which is called rechilus, means repeating innocuous gossip, innocent things. So-and-so got a new house. I hear she's expecting. I'm not saying anything wrong. You're not saying anything bad. You're not saying anything false. It's all true. It's true. It's innocent. And it's forbidden. Unless there is a compelling reason to say it, you cannot speak about people, because many unforeseen negative consequences can happen when you're saying such comments to other people. Anyone here has been in that situation where people are saying true, innocent things and it gets really bad?
I understand why it's not allowed. Like, why can't I tell someone my mom bought a new house or my sister bought a new house?
For a lot of reasons.
Jealousy, Ayin Hara. That's it. That's the only thing I can think of.
One very strong piece is the two things you just said. There's inciting other people's bad feelings. If you happen to be so excited talking about so-and-so's pregnant, and someone there you didn't realize has been waiting for a child, you spoke about someone's new job, and someone there has been looking for a job for 6 months already, it's very hurtful, and it could create, not that the other person wants to, it's not that the person that's hearing this perhaps wishes to harm that person, but there could be just this knee-jerk bad feeling, and that bad feeling could and does sometimes create a lot of harm for that person. As you're calling it ayin hara, it's a little bit different version. It's not exactly ayin hara, it's maybe what we call a kapeda, but it's a certain negative energy coming because somebody got upset. That's one piece, which you're saying, and that's 100% correct. There's also another piece, which is you have no clue what the other person's going through, what their experiences are. So very simply, I mean, I'd be shocked if none of you have ever experienced something like this. You're saying, oh, I'm so excited. My teacher got the best Rebbe in the school. My teacher has such a great teacher. My child has such a great teacher this year. She's so wonderful. I'm in this new aerobics class. I love the instructor. She's so with it and lively and caring. And someone says, really? You think so? Well, that's not my experience. Well, you should only know. Well, I heard. That's why we're told we have to be so careful, because what we say innocently, nicely, positively could inspire someone else to say, or even to think something very derogatory about that person, to disagree, to say, I actually had a very bad experience with them. I actually didn't like them at all. I actually don't think they're as nice as you're saying. I actually think they're a big hypocrite. Dina?
I've actually had these experiences where people get triggered easily by something I said in a very neutral way. But I'm also wondering, when in terms of like when you're trying to identify someone, like I have a couple, like almost all the time in schools, like when there's so many moving parts, and when I'm in the school and I'm trying to say, oh, this person told me, this person said, like when I'm trying to identify someone that I just met and I don't know, or they don't know who he is. So I'm like, oh, he's tall. Like, how do you describe that? How do you like identify someone without, I don't know, bringing in those factors?
What we're told is, if there's a compelling reason, since what you're saying is true and innocent, you're not saying anything bad, you're not saying anything false, you're not saying anything with any malicious intent, you're trying to describe someone, and like me, you forget names, you're allowed to do it. But again, you want to always, and it's really hard because these things happen fast. It's not like we have so much time to meditate before we open our mouth. So we just talk a lot quickly, and it's sometimes hard to remember the sensitivities people that you're talking to. Like as a teacher, there's this whole debate. Do you or do you not give background information on the children to a teacher? And some people feel yes, and some people feel no, and there's opinions on both sides of the fence, and I'm not going to go into that debate. But on the side of sharing, well, if I know this child comes from a divorced home, I'll be a little careful in some of the comments I say in class. If I know this child comes from a home where someone's suffering an illness, that would screen some of my comments. If I know this child has a sibling who's going through a really hard time, but we don't always know that. We're not always told the history of everyone as we talk to them. And therefore we can say things that really could, like you say, trigger. Miriam?
What if someone goes with a therapist? What do they what do they say? Like if somebody goes to a therapist, let's say, how do you talk without saying lashon hara about someone that you know? that's on your mind or whatever.
So the question would be, first of all, does the therapist know the people personally, or they totally don't know them, they're not in your world? And second of all, very often, unless it's a relative where you sort of have no choice, but if it's another person in your world, you could make up a name. You don't have to give the name, and you don't have to really worry about the incriminating details because they probably don't know your world anyway. But let's say it's your husband or your mother or your mother-in-law. So then we would call that a compelling reason, because you're going to the therapist to heal. And like going to a doctor, you know, can a woman go to a male doctor? Hey, that's not modest. Well, if he's the best doctor in that field, yes, it's 100% allowed. If there's equal or better female doctors, ideally go to a female doctor. If he's better and he's male, go to the male doctor. That's a health issue. So similarly, if this therapist is helping you deal with things and the only way is by them knowing who you're talking about, then it's okay. In a more conventional sense, if you would see someone doing something wrong and you want to share it with their parent or with their teacher, that's not considered gossiping. That's considered a compelling reason. You're telling them only because they have responsibility for this person. They're trying to educate the person to become a better person, to grow. And therefore, they need to know the facts. They need to know where they're holding so that they can properly educate them. If you tell what you saw to your next door neighbor, that's gossip. If you tell what you saw to the parent, it's not. Similar if you're speaking to a therapist and it's obvious who you're talking about because like you're identifying a mother, a mother-in-law, a husband. So that's going to the doctor. So someone's put up a question, well, what about sharing that someone's engaged or something like that? So in those situations, again, you would sort of screen now, what is the compelling reason? Is there a compelling reason? Yeah, the compelling reason is if my best friend doesn't hear from me that my daughter's engaged, she's going to be really hurt. Okay, so that's a compelling reason. You know, if my community doesn't get informed that I'm making a l'chaim, they're going to all be insulted and feel they weren't invited. Okay, that's a compelling reason. But if I'm just in a crowd and talking about the details, I have to be careful, especially because there could be people in that crowd whose children are not married. There could be people in that crowd whose children are married, but it's not a happy situation. There could be people in that crowd who are themselves trying to get married. So you always have to be really, really careful not to say anything that could create harm, that could create bad feelings, that create a kapeda, that could create someone to say, no, that's not true, and actually start saying bad about the situation. That's why in general, we're told better not speak about people.
Are you allowed to talk, Ms. Turner, are you allowed to talk about maybe how beautiful the wedding was or how beautiful simcha is, or is that also?
So it's, again, it's the same idea. You have to really carefully think, is there a reason to say this? And is there anyone here that could get triggered? And do I really know? Like, let's take Shira's example. You were at a gorgeous wedding the night before, and you're just with a group of friends or women or wherever you are in Joel, you know, met 3 other people, and you're talking. So maybe someone's going to feel, I wasn't invited. Why did they invite me? I thought we were friends. And maybe someone else is going to feel, oh my gosh, they spent so much money on that wedding. They should give more to tzedakah and stop raising the bar so high for the rest of us. And someone else could feel, oh, I feel so bad. I'm making a wedding and it's going to be so simple. What are people going to say about me the next day? Now, are any and all those thoughts plausible? They're all, I just said, very realistic thoughts, very real things that people could feel and think when you're nicely sharing how gorgeous the wedding was last night. And that's why we have to really be careful with our words. We have to really screen our words because we have no clue what's going on in someone else's head and heart. And we have no clue how they could be hurt. If they have negative energy, again, it could come out as this kapeda. Or they could think or say, oh, those people don't deserve that. Why do they have such mazel? They're not such good people. Triggered by jealousy, triggered by bad experiences. So it's a dangerous thing. So in essence, we're really not supposed to speak about other people. That's sort of like the general perspective. And we got to find something higher to talk about than other people because, and we don't want anything bad. We're not saying anything bad here. This is the most innocent conversation. But all these things could flow from it. So I guess it's good that none of you are aware of any situations like that have actually happened. But it definitely does happen. And I'm saying Shira's example is so realistic. It is so easy for someone to get hurt thinking about this beautiful wedding that happened the night before with all of the things I just said. I have such a simple wedding. I'm so embarrassed. Why are they making such a fancy wedding? Why do they have to flash it all around? Why is my child not engaged and I can't even make a wedding? You know, all of these things. So you could say, why is it my problem? Why do I have to worry about all the junk in other people's heads? But we do. We do have to be sensitive to other people. We do want to be caring and thoughtful and make sure we never say anything that's hurtful. And therefore, we don't say things that really could hurt. That is, as I said, the most innocuous situation, because again, you're saying what you're saying is true, and what you're saying is positive. You are only saying positive things in ruchilus. That whole category is positive, innocent words. And again, just like Dina said, yeah, you have to speak because you have to identify someone in work, or like Miriam said, you have to speak. You're talking to a therapist. Or you have to speak, you're talking to a parent, a teacher. There are times when you have to say these words. But if we don't have to, we should really avoid it. Now, obviously, much worse than this is lashon hara. I mean, that term we all know, lashon hara.
I was wondering, what about speaking about yourself? Just because I'm thinking of times I've used myself, just personal life examples. What about that?
That's a great question. So there's two answers to that, meaning there's two aspects to that. One is, we are not allowed to say lashon hara about ourselves. So if it's actually lashon hara, it's forbidden to say lashon hara about ourselves. Meaning you can't say, oh, you know, I fill in the blanks. You know, I did this so wrong, and I this and I that, and you bash yourself, and I mean, a lot of us do that. We far more easily talk bad about ourselves than other people. You're not allowed to. It's literally forbidden. You're literally not allowed to say lashon hara about yourself. Now, again, you're talking to your rabbi, you're talking to your mentor, you're talking to your mashpia. It's like Miriam said, talking to the therapist. There's a reason. But just talking bad about yourself, no, you're not allowed to do that. Another like sort of issue is, and I struggle with this myself in teaching very often. I very often think the best way to convey something is to give a personal example. Personal examples are much more interesting than just hearing some dry facts. Everyone wants to know the scoop of someone else's life, right? But again, same considerations like before. Maybe you'll say something and it'll trigger someone else to have a bad feeling. Oh, your husband did that for you. My husband wouldn't do that for me. Oh, wow, your kids are doing so well. I mean, they were struggling, but now you're saying the happy end to the story. I mean, my kids are still in the trenches. So again, and I personally, for myself, like sort of weigh that back and forth sometimes when I teach, which is yes, share, don't share. And I sort of screen and judge, is this, like we're saying, a compelling reason? Is this really important to share? Will this really help? Okay, there's a reason. If it won't, just to talk, just like she was talking about the gorgeous wedding the night before. You never know how it could trigger someone else.
Mrs. Turin, what about like, I'm just thinking of this because I just got off the phone with someone, but like when I'm trying to like comfort clients, like, oh, like I also, school wasn't easy for me, and like it's okay, like we just we get them through, and like I'll say things like that along those lines just to be like, I guess the goal is to like comfort them that like it'll be okay in the end.
So if you're saying it and it is creating empathy, then you're saying that's the compelling reason. You're not just talking. There's a compelling reason. You're trying to comfort, you're trying to give support, you're trying to give hope. Oh my gosh, you should see how bad my report card was. Trust me, I made it through. You will far better. Your grades are far better than mine were when I was your age. Yeah, I'm sure you will succeed way beyond me. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. You're saying it very specifically. You have a compelling reason. You're saying it not just because you want to run your mouth, not just because you want to, like, we all like talking about ourselves. We're so narcissistic. No, you're saying it to give them comfort, to give them hope. So if that's what's happening, that's your reason.
I just wanted to share, it's not just that our words can kill or build, but they can also, even our being careful with Shmer Salashon can build. And I didn't realize to what extent until, this is going back my first, let me think, 2000. And this man is married with several kids now. At the time that he was my student, he was 10. And he was not the best of students at all academically. I didn't know what his reputation was because why should I? To me, even when teachers will ask previous year's teachers, oh, tell me about this one in my class, tell me about that one. To me, no, I want to know from Aleph. And so this child, he was not doing what I was expecting. And he looked at me and said, well, didn't Rabbi so-and-so tell you? I'm a bum. With that, now in general, okay, granted, my face is, not on the screen here, but in general, I tend to have a pretty calmed, positive demeanor. And I put on my angriest face possible. And with my sternest tone said, no one is allowed to speak Lashon Hara about my child, about my student. Now, go back to your desk, here's the assignment. Do you need me, do you need clarification? And he looked and that was it. He came over to me maybe 5 minutes later and said, I'm still a bum, right? And I said, I told you, no one is allowed to say anything like that about my student. No one. You're not allowed to even think the Lashon Hara.
Absolutely. You are so right. And that's a great story. Great story. We should all remember that. Teachers, parents, all of us are so impactful. And yes, there's a reason our sages say you're not allowed to say Lashon Hara about yourself. So Lashon Hara, again, so what we were talking about before was Rechilus. Rechilus means it's innocent, it's true, you have only the best intentions, and don't talk about people. Lashon Hara means you're speaking about things that are not innocent. You're speaking about someone's shortcomings, indiscretions, and of course, we all know that's forbidden. It's also forbidden to your spouse. Some people have this thing in their brain that, talking to your husband is like talking to yourself. It's also forbidden to your best friend. That's also not talking to yourself. Sometimes, of course, we got really hurt from someone and we really need to process it. And a lot of times we process by talking to other people. Sometimes that's useful when we did get hurt, when someone did something wrong and it was wrong and hurt us, and we really are upset and we really need to deal with this. Don't tell yourself you can't tell anyone, because you're going to, probably. Switch that need to discuss it with a mentor at a pre-designated time, not right after it happens when you're so upset. Give yourself a little time to process, to cool down. Or like Miriam said, with a therapist. In other words, with someone that's there in your life to help you process. Because if you're talking to your spiritual mentor, you're talking to your rabbi, you're talking to your therapist, that's not gossip. You're saying it for a reason to heal. But otherwise, if you just talk, including to your husband, that is gossip. And then third category, moving sort of quickly along, because I do have something I want to get much deeper in this. But I definitely want to review this, is what's called Maitzi Shem Ra. Maitzi Shem Ra means unfounded, libelous gossip, which means Lashon Hara is true. Lashon Hara is you're saying true, bad facts about someone else. And Maitzi Shem Ra means it's not true. It's a libel. And a lot of times people just think, just talk. There are so many stories of words causing catastrophic harm. Unfortunately, it really does happen. Words are really, really harmful. I'm sure we all know that famous story of the person that said all this talk and then, went to the rabbi and he said, whatever, open up the feather pillow, open up the feather blanket, and then gather back the feathers. I'm sure we all heard that story a few times, but it's really true. Now, sometimes you're not trying to create a story. You think what you're saying is absolute truth because you heard it from a very reliable source, like your neighbor and Joel. And then maybe you just embellished it a little, and you pass it on to someone else who embellished it a little, and it becomes worse and worse and worse. Whenever you're talking, even again there's a reason to say this person has a need to know, we have to be very careful with our word choice. We have to remember that people are not discreet. Sometimes, of course, I'm sure this also happens to a lot of us. You're not talking. You would not say these things. Please, you don't talk about other people. Of course not. Sure not Lashon Hara. Oh, of course not. But someone's talking to you. What are you supposed to do? As I said initially, according to the Baal Shem Tov, based on the Talmud, when we say Lashon Hara kills 3, One of the three is the one who's listening to the Lashon Hara. You, that innocent you, that's like, I really don't want to be part of this. What am I supposed to do? Say, oh, I don't listen to Lashon Hara. What am I supposed to do? Sometimes you have to politely excuse yourself from the conversation. Sometimes you have to change the subject. Sometimes you have to explain why you don't want to listen. I don't feel comfortable talking about other people. You're trying to get from me, maybe you think I have a knowledge about this person. I really don't. Maybe you should ask that person directly. I really don't know the story. Why is it so wrong? Why do you think our sages say that Lashon Hara also kills the listener? Thoughts why it's so murderous? Not just for the one that made up the story, not just for the one that's talking about other people, but the listener is considered undergoing a spiritual death by this experience. Like, you're innocent. You don't want this.
Maybe because when they're listening to somebody, the speaker's full perception and the way they're saying something or what their thoughts were on it, their subjectivity is like put onto the listener. So it like becomes their subconscious thoughts too.
I was thinking exactly that. And I'm sure I've definitely experienced it. When someone talks to you about someone, even if you're saying in your head, I am not accepting this. I know this person's just a yenta. I don't think this is true at all. How do I know? But you always remember it. And it colors how you view that person. And again, I'm sure I'm not the only one that's been in the situation. And it's just very, very hard and sometimes very, very sticky. And again, you could say in your brain again and again and again, I don't accept this. I don't believe this person. How do they know? I don't know. I don't accept this. I don't know. It's not my position to judge. I have no desire to know. It's not my business. You could tell this to yourself in your brain the whole time that other person is ranting. But underneath that, you're hearing it. And it's affecting you. Anyone here has seen that with themselves? Like they didn't want to, but sort of absorb someone else's negative perspective? Shira?
Yes, I have definitely met people that if I knew nothing bad about them, I would have thought totally different. But I already had in my head something about them. And it changed the way I act towards them, my interest in them. Yeah, it's really not good.
And that's why the listener is considered undergoing this spiritual death. This innocent listener, because you carry the story with you. Like whatever was said, it stays inside of you forever. Anyone have any great tips? Because we've all been in this situation. Any great tips what you do when someone's talking like that? I mean, I shared a few, but anyone have any other good ideas?
I don't have any tips, but I feel like we're all, not all, I shouldn't talk for all of us, but most of us are in trouble when it comes to this. I don't know. How do you prevent this?
I agree
As a listener, even like, how do you walk away from someone and do it politely without them all of a sudden you walk away from what they're saying to you and then they tell someone else, oh, I was trying to tell Miriam this and she completely and then she's talking
now they're going to talk about you.
And the cycle continues.
Yes, yes, yes. And if you tell them, oh, I don't talk about people, for sure they'll talk about you. Exactly. You are exactly right. It is a very sticky situation. And, sometimes like when you're on the phone, I find it a little easier because when you're on the phone, you could, oh my gosh, my kid's having a meltdown. Bye. Oh, my husband needs me. I'm trying to be a good wife today. Bye. You could make up something that sounds plausible and get off the phone. When it's in person, you have to sort of look at your watch and realize, oh, I can't believe where the time flew. I sorry. I got to get moving. I gotta finish my shopping. They always wonder how I get lost in Joel. Aliza?
When I'm in person, which these days still is not so much, but what I've always done is my attitude is I have to use the bathroom at some point. And if I have to at that moment, it could be because I need to use the bathroom, or it could be because I need to use the bathroom as a place to escape. They don't have to know what I'm really using it for, but I must use the bathroom. Excuse me.
That's a great idea.
That's
it. Great. That's great. You're being honest and it's great. I like that one. Dina?
I think that I have certain clients or friends that like I've identified have a tendency to kind of like go into other people's personal information. So I like whenever I am like going to be talking to them, or I try to like be very planful and intentional. And when I get on the phone, say like, you know what, I wish I had longer. I really only have 10 minutes. And yeah, I would love to just talk about like whatever we needed to talk about, so that like it could hopefully diminish the.
Oh, I like that. I thought you were going to say something else, but I like what Dina's saying. I'm going to pass it on. So what Dina was saying was, when she's talking to someone who we don't have clients per se, that's a different issue perhaps, but, or we might, but if you're talking to someone who you know has a tendency to go in that direction, it's good to start the conversation by saying, oh, I really don't have so much time, but I'd love to talk to you. So I was thinking, so as soon as they go in that direction, you could say, oh, I knew I wouldn't have enough time. It was so nice talking to you, got to go. In person or out, because you already sort of preempted that idea by saying, I don't have a lot of time. So then when you suddenly don't have any time, it's very natural. You already said that before they even started gossiping. Now, Dina's saying it in a way of let's like get business done and not waste our time. And that is good too. But I'm saying, I think you can use the same technique with friends and relatives. If you know they have a tendency to talk about other people, and you start the conversation saying, I don't have, now they might wonder why every conversation you say that, they might wonder what's going on in your life. And as Miriam said, they might start talking about you, but whatever. I think it's still a very, very good tip. I think we have to be careful about our compliments. You need to think who you're talking to. Will they object? Will they say it's not true? She's not. Or is the compliment actually sound insulting? You mean it so sincerely, but maybe it's going to be twisted and come out as an insult. Even if you say, oh, don't ask, I'd rather not talk about that. I'd rather not talk about that person. That's implied lashon hara. That's pretty clear gossip without saying anything. So what can we do over this? So I just want to bring out two spiritual points quickly, but I think they're very important because, as Miriam said, we all deal with this. None of us are, we're probably all not pristine, innocent, and never, do wrong ourselves. And one way or another, it definitely impacts our lives, all of our lives. So 2 points I wanted to share. One is from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and it's an idea that really helps me a lot with controlling my tongue for sure, and trying to control my thoughts. And the Rebbe says that whenever you say or think negatively about someone, you are strengthening their bad. This actually sort of reflects back to what we were discussing 2 weeks ago and 3 weeks ago. If you think about that and realize it's true, it's a great deterrent from just talking about other people. If you think about your mother, your husband, your kid, not even in your world, and just you're talking with your friends, with your mother, your husband, and or when your children get older, it sounds funny, but for me, my hardest area of talking about people is with my children about my children. It sincerely is, because they're older, they're out of the home, we're very close, we talk a lot. So obviously everybody wants to know what's going on, be part of everyone else's life. It's their siblings. They love their siblings. And I'm like, I really try to filter my conversation with a sense of like, not in terms of they would say anything bad, but just like, are we gossiping here? So again, always keeping in mind when you say, oh, this kid always has his meltdowns, or, oh, she's so stubborn, he's been so difficult lately, you're strengthening those negative energies. Now, of course, obviously you're talking about someone else where there's really no excuse, but you just heard something and like to share it. If it's negative, you're strengthening the negativity in that person by saying it or by thinking it. Not worth it. Not worth it if that person could harm you, and not worth it just because you care about another human being and you don't want to make it harder for them. Not worth it. When you walk this road, oh my gosh, if I say all this stuff about my kids, I'm strengthening the problems. I complain about my husband, I'm strengthening the problem. I complain about my mother-in-law, I'm strengthening the problem. I complain about my mother, I'm strengthening the problem. I complain about my neighbor, I'm strengthening the problem. It works, but you always are sort of like fighting yourself. You always need to like control yourself and not say it, and you don't want to strengthen the bad. And, you know, like Eliza said, every single Avera happening for every single word you say. I mean, there's all that like inner fighting. There's another way to deal with it, which is a much deeper way. And the much deeper way to try to cure the illness of talking about other people badly is to really try in yourself to respect and love people. Because the more you respect and love people, the less you want to say negative about them. It's really amazing. It's in the Tanya, the seminal work of Chabad Hasidus, written by the Alter Rebbe. He discusses how we're supposed to treat people that harm us. And it's really intense how good we're supposed to be to people that harm us. And why are we supposed to be good to people that harm us? People not just, you know, oh, I heard this person, you know. No, you personally have suffered. And you're supposed to really pull out a love and a positive relationship and being nice to these people. And the concept is, if someone's hurt you, you should envision them as God's messenger for your good. That does not remove their bad choice. Every Jew is a free agent. They freely chose to mess you over. They freely chose to hurt you. They freely chose to gossip about you. They freely chose to do things that are harmful to you or to your children. And they'll probably get punished. That's between them and God. From your end, everything that happens to you is ultimately from God. Every person that interacts with you is ultimately God's messenger. And God's good. So this is a messenger for good. And if someone's a messenger for good, I have to repay them with good. This goes back to the Parsha, right? When Parshas Vayigash, Yosef was so good to his brothers in Egypt. He was so kind to them. He took care of them. He gave them the best land. He supported them. He gave them enough food that the kids could make messes on the floor, no problems. He was so good to them. And they started feeling like uncomfortable. Like, I mean, we did sort of want to kill you. We did sell you as a slave, no, down the river. Like, why are you treating us like this? Said, well, if someone means to give you poison, but accidentally, they gave you the most exquisite aged wine, the best wine. You thank them for the wine. They didn't mean to give it to you. They actually meant to give you poison. But it doesn't make a difference what they meant. In the end of the day, they gave you the best wine. Shouldn't you thank them for that? So Yosef said to his brothers, you meant to harm me. You didn't. But God meant it for good. So what you were doing in facilitating the storyline was God's plan, was good. So I have to thank you for being God's messengers for good. Now you could say, well, Yosef's a really holy person. I mean, that's not us. But this is actually realistic in our life, meaning it's very healing when you think this way. It opens up a lot of dark spaces inside. It fills them with light. It releases a lot of pain when we know this is all God's script. This is God's plan. People are pawns putting God's plan into action. Again, people are pawns with their own independent free will, but they're still pawns. They're still putting God's plan into action. And sometimes with hindsight, you can totally see the good. And sometimes you can't. And maybe until this day, I mean, I am sure every single one of us, I can definitely raise my hand to this, has been hurt by people. And maybe some of those situations, I can see how they were for my ultimate good. And some of them, I still cannot. Maybe eventually I will. Maybe I never will. But if I can or if I can't, it's all good. And when I think along these lines, and specifically, very specifically in situations where people have hurt me, if I think along these lines, and sometimes you have to think many, many, many times till you really can digest this and say, well, that's how I have to treat this person. I have to treat this person as God's messenger for my good. Now, if they're a harmful, dangerous person, You don't have to be best friends with them, even though they're God's messenger for your good. You can still create protective barriers. So maybe somebody else is going to be God's messenger for good and not them. So we're not saying you have to make yourself a shmata to every negative person out there. You can protect yourself. You're allowed to protect yourself. Protecting yourself is not wrong. But if it happened, somehow they got through the protective barriers, you didn't know to protect yourself, you still have to say, okay, it happened. In the future, I might protect myself from this person. But what they gave me was good, because what they gave me was God. And I want to treat them that way. And just taking this one step further, just imagining as harmful, as destructive as negative speech is. Remember, we said it's 10 out of the 44 confessions we say 10 times over Yom Kippur. Even more, I'm not saying to the same degree, I'm saying even more beneficial is positive speech. Praising, speaking positively. It benefits you. It benefits the person you're talking to. It benefits the world. So our speech is incredibly powerful. And if we're not really focused, it's very likely it's not going always in the best directions. We might fall prey to rechilas. We might fall prey to lashon hara. We might fall prey to mitzi shemra. We didn't know it wasn't true. We might fall prey just to other negative uses of our tongue. But when we think about it and we're focused and we're recognizing both ends, every time I say or think bad about a person, it strengthens their bad. If I really believe this is true, I should definitely not even think it. And conversely, how can I really work on myself to accept a person with love? Maybe what I said about really envisioning them as God's messenger is like too high a bar. And maybe a simpler thing is have compassion for them. Yes, this person hurt me. And they must have gone through a lot of trauma in their life to treat people like that. And I have no clue what's going on in their life right now. Or maybe I do. Maybe that can help my compassion. Wow, this person was so nasty to my child. But I could think about their life and I could maybe understand how they're hurting so much inside that they would say what they said to my child. So compassion might be an easier approach than really trying to be like Joseph and his brothers. But it's also a tool that can shift the emotions inside of us. So it's not just, I have all this negative information, but I'm going to be a holy person today and not say it and not even think it. With compassion, or with being like Yosef, we take away that negative. And then we could really look at people positively, speak positively, and create just a lot of positivity in our world. So as a lot of people said, this is very relevant. We deal with this. We struggle with this. We've probably been